your name, address, and phone number, so I have it on tape, and the correct spelling. So if you could give that to me.
I should, when I recite the name, do I spell it?
Yes, please.
Right away. Yeah. Yes, I'm Alan P. Forsyth. That's an Allen P for middle initial, and Forsyth. And I live at 2305 Marietta in Steilacoom, Washington, and that is 98388. You wouldn't be interested in the telephone number?
Yes, please.
Oh, really?
Just so I have it on
Well,
file.
telephone number is 581-5162 in Steilacoom.
I have to think of, I got Frank Adams. Do you know Frank? Down in Steilacoom?
No, what does he do?
Well, I'm trying to remember his rank. He's retired.
Oh, one of those guys tumbling around there.
Now your rank was colonel.
Yes, 16 years, Colonel, never made BG. No.
And how and when did you get into the service?
Well, I was practicing law in Minneapolis, 7th floor of the Northwest Bank building. And the head secretary in the law firm was a broad-minded gal and had some military connections. And I had a brother that was in the Army at the time, and they were hitting it off pretty well, and kind of feeling sorry for me because I was unhappy. I found out what the practice of law is like. It is the most miserable, if you're not really sympathetic with it, I guess, or something that solves that problem with some people, certainly. Anyway, then as now, there were ways of getting some privileges out of the government, and they knew about a program that, and I was flying a little bit with Cubs and things like that, and it cost about $1.25, I think, for about a half hour of flying in those days. And even I could afford that and making $200 a month in this law firm. See? Yeah. Well, anyway, we made some I mostly observed these two getting me into a real flying school. Wouldn't cost me anything. I could enlist as a flying cadet, and I could go over to Fort Snelling and sign in to the Army, enlist, it's called, and they take it from there. And sure enough, I was on a train for San Antonio, Texas, and went through flying training.
So what year are we at?
Okay, very good. That's 39. And I got out in 39 too. It was a very interesting thing for me because what I guess I discovered was that my heart was really with machines and three-dimensional problems instead of straight legal problems. And went through there with no problems or never had any trouble flying an airplane or anything. Never got a pink slip, what we called it, to try a little harder or something like that.
So what type of bird did you fly?
Well, at that time, you started out with something about a PT-3. It didn't have brakes, it didn't have lights, it didn't have a tail wheel. The other cadets would run out onto the field and grab a wing and hold you here and try to accelerate your wide swing to get you into the line even. There was nothing. That's where you started. And that is pretty basic. You're just flying. This thing would get into the air and it'd stay in the air a couple of hours and come back and land it. And then you progress. The next thing you got about was brakes. And then a couple of weeks later, you find that you've got a steerable tail wheel and so forth. So it's a steady progression. And they finally graduate you after a tour at Kelly, which is at San Antonio also, when you have lights and brakes and the whole thing, instruments, and you worry about more things as you go on, of course. And I just got, which was customary in those days, I think, I just got orders to go to McCord Field and join the 3rd Bomb Group. And I made my way up here, McCord, and was assigned ever since. I found somebody that handed me orders, and he spelled it right and so forth. So kept going.
When you enlisted, things were still pretty calm.
They didn't know, and of course, we were friendly with any neighbor and so forth, and as was everybody else. We didn't know about it. We thought things were a little crazy. Nobody ever figured out really what Hitler was all about. I don't suppose they did in Europe any more than they did here, but they certainly didn't. And it wasn't until, of course, the 7th of December, 1941, and that's a thing you should really cover. When the country galvanized from being a Republican to a Democrat is nothing compared to what happened to each individual that paid any attention to international affairs. And there was just more than we could handle on the 8th of December of 1941. We are at war, and we knew it, and it didn't take Roosevelt long to recognize that he'd better get really rolling, and he had been rolling for a couple of years. You know?
How did you find it? Where were you when you heard the news?
Heard the news.
And what were you thinking? What did you
Oh, yes. I was in the hospital with an overnight thing. They babied the heck out of their pilots, you see. And if you were in a rated, why, that's what they called flying status. If you were rated, why, then they took care of you. If you sniffled in the hospital, you go, you see. And I was walking around the building across from the castle on McCord Field, in the hall, and I heard this thing that the Japanese, attacked the essentials of the whole thing. You can do that in about one sentence and have people just losing it. Yeah, that's where I was, and of course, I quickly got out of the infirmary. I mean, right now, and didn't think about it for years. Whatever. Yeah, that was it.
And at this point, once Pearl Harbor started and they started really enlisting and bringing these young kids in,
you bet.
You must have been an old timer, kind of.
Okay. Oh yes, I was. But well acquainted. I thought I knew lots of things. Didn't bear out that well, I suppose, but yeah, I thought so. And flying an airplane all by myself and so forth, comes very, very quickly. Conditions like that.
So, where did you get sent?
Well, I stayed at McCord for a few months. That would be maximum, wherever you were and wherever you were. I was Estler Field in Louisiana and hopped from base to base in Florida, And these places were building frantically, as you can imagine, in that time of the war. And any bulldozer that could move dirt was out moving dirt. And they realized that they had some things to be doing. Roosevelt, had been helping, literally helping, the destroyer adventure was big stuff, really. The British thinking they're a naval country, were broke, and they had nothing that would float either. So our joining them, Churchill's, words, in due course our friends from the West will come and we will get into the war again. They were broke, they had no weapons, just in terrible shape. And of course France was conquered. Pétain had to go clear down on the Mediterranean to find a place that he could even call his headquarters, and the Germans ran the rest of the country. So, that got underway pretty fast. And I was going from one airplane to another night and day. It was very, very active, and they were using people like me to get train some other people that were coming in a way, but never anything but a tactical pilot. See, never was in the training command or anything like that. So I just kept going from airplane to airplane, bomber to bomber, and a little more advanced. And I got into 25s, which is a sweetheart of an airplane. Anybody can fly that, whether they're trained or not. And enjoyed that, and went again from base to base. The whole country was interested in getting ahead, but they didn't exactly know where they were going and where they would want to go and be helpful. The country's heart was in this thing very satisfactorily. I never did see the public lose interest in what we were doing and vice versa.
So did you, so you're still stateside at this point?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So when did you finally get orders?
Well, yes. Well, in 60, or in 42, 41 was, in 42, I realized that I was pointed toward bigger things, and I went to one base after the other that would have a few more 25s, and somebody around who understood some more about how you would fight a 25 instead of just ride in one, so forth. But this went very, very fast. I was training mostly in Florida and Carolina, and then we were finding out how to have a crew, dividing up in a crew. That's pretty great stuff. You got to have a bombardier, and you got to have a navigator, and how do they work together? How can they make it? And then one day in in 42, early 42, spring, got orders to go to Florida and be organized into a fighting outfit. And we had 25 25s, And we had a lieutenant colonel as squadron commander. And in a very short time, in 10 days, we were flying 25 airplanes, you know. That's finishing us off. And then we simply got individual orders to take off starting here, and our clearances would be for the next station. And how they did that, I don't know, because you just couldn't find an American on an air base except one guy, and he was an expediter. And he was an old colonel, older than I am, this very day probably, and he didn't allow any malingering. You got orders to go to Belém, see? And you've got orders to go to Roberts Field in Africa. And what are you standing around here for? Well, that's been minutes, you know. if you're right. No, they were really ruthless. And this guy never said a kind word to anybody. I don't think he ever did, but for instance, that kind of a guy. Anyway, he started moving us, and the only people that I ever saw were 25s, and our 25s. We were the only people in the action until we got to Africa, and then we started finding some P-40s. And I don't think we had any P-40s. Let's leave it at P-40.
What was your on the 25? What was your duty? What did you were you the pilot or were you?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I was the oldest pilot there, I suppose. Instead of our squadron commander was a wonderful guy. We killed him as soon as we got into real action, of course. And my duty, so we went on. 18 stops that they directed me to stop at, mostly to get gas, and also to pick up some more P-40s. So that by the time I got to about Cairo, I had a family of 40s too. And they hung on to me because of our navigator, you see, because we knew the way to Baghdad and Bahrain and so forth.
Is a 40 smaller than a 25?
Oh, 40 is a fighter.
Fighter, that's
fighter,
what I thought.
single
Okay.
engine fighter.
Yeah.
And they were going to the AVGs. See, these guys were wearing overalls and straw hats and stuff like that. You know. And then they'd always get mired on our stops too, because they'd meet girlfriends there that didn't want to get up that early in the morning and so forth. But anyway, we kept chugging along through to India, where we had a very interesting time, and we established a kind of a squadron headquarters. We were going to. We didn't have any idea where we were going. We knew that they weren't fighting in India and so forth. We were fighting somewhere still to the east, and it'd be a good long time, and formidable Himalayas in the way and all that sort of thing. But that's where we were going. And what we did was we divided the squadron in half, and I was the next guy to Leland, who was lieutenant colonel. So I was a lieutenant at the time, and the senior guy under the squadron commander. Yeah. So Leland, we decided in our wisdom that he would go get orders where we were going. We knew then we were going to cross the Himalayas and go into China. We knew that and something. Anyway, we decided that he would go take half of the squadron and go first and find out what it's all about, and then he would get a message back to me, and you come on, and with the rest of the guys. Yeah. Well, when Leland had about 10 airplanes that he took off with, and 2 of them made it. The rest of them, they went into cloud up there at the top of the Himalayas, and they were too close to the peaks, so they ripped all but 2 of his planes went into the rock and so forth, including Leland. And these 2 guys happened to be good, solid people, good crews. They went on to a place called Kunming, beautiful spot. My wife and I have been back there just to owe and awe at a wonderful place. And I didn't even know who I was going to get orders from then. But there came orders. I've thought about that a great deal. Who in the hell were these people giving us orders, and why did we follow them? We bombed people, we killed people, we shot up villages and so forth. And we didn't know who we were or what we were doing, really. Really. There was no substance to our organization, just people that could, if you can fly an airplane or fix an airplane or load a bomb properly or navigate to a target, we can use you. If not, you weren't there, I guess. Yeah.
So the orders kept coming?
The orders kept coming. And there was a guy there and a bunch of these guys that wore straw hats and so forth around. And the boss around there was a guy named Chenault. And we hired him by the hour, I guess, or some damn thing. He was the most nondescript character you ever saw. Of course, we made a major general out of him for a good reason. He was the only guy that really knew any art of what we were doing over there, and especially those fighters. They got $500 a kill, fighters, and they had to have pictures of the kill. The cameras would go on when the forward firing 50 calibers would go on and so forth. And they kept us alive. There's no question about it, because we would go out on missions and the sky would be full of Zeros. They're trying to protect their nest. And then, my God, and they had a ball until these bombers came. And that's what the old Chenault was saying. We've got to get a cubby, you see, so that we can do some good. So that's when they got this idea and brought those 25s over. And the Japanese really didn't like that. They didn't, because we dropped bombs on them and their hangars and a line of Zeros or anything we could find that would make them least happy, we would bomb, and we could bomb by then. And
so is that usually your targeted orders were, here's where a base is?
That's right.
Sneak over the mountains?
Yep. That's what it is. Just stuff like that. And our navigators are always close to us, because where in the hell are we, you know? And where are we going again? And how far is that going to be? And how high is it going to be? And so forth. Yeah. It's very primitive, really. Just can't believe it. But that's the way we started. And nobody knew anything. The last thing that rang in my ears, really authoritative, was Roosevelt. And I sure became, I don't know whether I became a Democrat, but I certainly became an admirer of a guy that could be president for 4 terms. He was elected at least to 4 terms.
What's it like flying in a mission like that? I mean, loud, cold, hot?
Well, noisy. Mostly. As I say, the 25 was a very forgiving airplane for keeping the thing in the air and doing something with it. But they used to have a collector ring on the engines. That is the ones that they introduced us to this nice airplane, you know. And then the next damn airplane that you got a hold of had the exhaust ports coming right out of the fuselage, see, out of the engine mount. And there were 18 cylinders, I suppose, on the thing. I haven't thought about that for about 50 years. But they just like they're coming right in your ears. You can't imagine sitting between those two engines. Just terrible. But we didn't bitch about anything, I guess, in those days. When the Chinese took care of us, they had pretty good beds for the Chinese. You can't get much better than rope, mattresses and springs and so forth are always a rope thing on a frame. And they fed us Chinese food, every bit as good as the stuff you can get at a Chinese restaurant now, and always tasted good. The first Chinese meal that I tried, man, this is good, tasty, as Chinese food is. It's got a wide clientele. And they kept our barracks clean and so forth, and there was a little. They guarded us too when we would get up in the morning, always way before daylight, that we got going, especially the flying guys that could get an airplane in the air. And then those guys would be in the dark of night, and they would be standing in the shadows, if there were any shadows of the moon, and then they would come up with the most blood-curdling cry of some sort, trying to scare us, see, and did. You just don't get used to a bunch of Chinese guards. But then they would laugh themselves sick because we didn't accept that as really a friendly act and so forth. But it got along as allies, I would say. Something like the world does it, like the United States does it. We don't ask questions about whether he's an Irishman or a Chinese or what he is in this country, and we weren't in those days. They were fighting a war, trying to get the job done, and so were we, and we got along fine.
See, we're sideways.
Yes, indeed.
What's it like to, you find this plane, it's full of bombs,
Yeah.
you find your target.
Yeah.
What's it like to open up and do a bombing?
Well, it's a very sober time. You Marshall, yourself, the navigator, and the bombardier has got to have a steady platform because the Norden bomb site was a kind of a nervous thing, and the bubbles would start, going up and down the tube, but you had to have the bubbles stopped. And how do you do that? You get that damn pilot up there to fly without correction, I guess, and still end up at the right spot up there. Everybody pops to and does the job because that's the payoff. That pays for everything, even getting shot down later or something. You wanted to have done something nasty, I guess. And the interesting thing about a 25, it never really gained that kind of popularity, but a 25 is faster than a zero. We could outrun a zero anytime. Give me those throttles up there, and we'll get the hell out of here. See, and that we didn't see zeros, except those that started from way above and had the energy of altitude, and they could come past us one pass. But we were gone,
How accurate could you be with? How high are you flying?
Oh,
when you're dropping your bombs?
we flew high. We flew high. well, what I say high, over 20,000 feet. And that was a peculiarity of mine, and nobody argued with me because I'd be the first one in there, you know. And I always kept my missions up so that nobody ever flew more than I did. But I flew at 20,000 feet because of the air battle that is generally on their damn zeros were all over the place and really, you know, working out their tactics against our tactics. But one of the things that we did was get 20,000. The zero was beginning to lose its altitude too. It didn't do well when it got up about there. So we could, the kind of shots that the Japanese were, that we generally could take one of them by the whole bunch because they were not that good. And then we'd be gone then. We wouldn't see anymore. Yeah. So that is the tactics. I got in trouble with them because just before I left home, the B-24s came. And that's a big lumbering thing. It has turbo supercharger, which is the key to altitude. Get air pressure up there. And we were gear driven, so it was kind of costly for us to go up there. But anyway, that's the way we went. And the B-24s, of course, had to brag. See? They had so goddamn many bombs in them. They couldn't fail to bomb everything. You know, they had so damn much of it in there. Well, we generally carried about 6 500-pounders in 25s. Well, anyway, they would boast about that. Well, of course, we did hit this bridge, or we did put a line across this railroad because we do it about 10,000 feet, you see. And I think the 25s were in on this thing, but I never saw them, see. Yeah, so there's some tactics, but I brought more of my people home. Those 24s were averaging about 30% casualties a mission. It was some operation just to keep them manned, you know. And we used to bring back our whole damn mission in many, many times. We didn't lose a plane. Yeah.
How long or how did you find out if you were successful in your bombing?
Well, of course, we had to, just like the fighters, had to have pictures of their target going down. We had the same requirements. They just studied and found what they wanted to find, I guess, of the pictures that we took of all the runs, and if you'd almost know by the fact that you could see on the pictures that the airplane wasn't stable enough to be a bomb sites platform, and of course. It'd fling a 500 bomb, 1,000 feet to the right of you, just like nothing. And that doesn't get a bridge, that sort of thing. But that's what we had another interesting little thing that we could do. This was another private adventure, and that is to sink the transcoastal route of the Japanese. The way that the occupied China at the time is the big bulge that really, if you're talking east and west and so forth, that is China. Well, it's so that the commerce comes out of Hong Kong, and he just can't help it. He isn't going to go way out to sea just to get around up here. So he stays as close to his course to where he's going up Shanghai and so forth, as he can. Well, we'd go out. Let's go out and get some this afternoon. See, So we'd get somebody, and I, to this day, don't know who the hell it was that we were requiring. Can we get some intercoastal shipping? And they always let us go. And we would fly there, well, just minimum, probably 10, 20 feet off the water, just enough to keep out of the water, and then we were always hoping that we would surprise them, that they weren't really watching for some damn little speck to get a little bit bigger. But anyway, we had very good luck with that. We lost a few people. Very good friend of mine that came back. We heard from him. His name was L.J. Murphy and crew. And by God, here a message comes through the Chinese that there is an American crew that is pushing inland, probably coming to they're probably trying to get to Kuilin, you know. And by God, they survived getting shot down. A nasty situation. Didn't have much altitude to work with, but they good people.
When you look back, do you ever, or even while you were there, did you wonder where your bombs were landing or anything?
Oh yeah. That's the payoff, and it's also your reputation. You and your crew have a mission to deliver bombs at a certain spot. And when we didn't do it, it was damn near tears, you know. Yeah, it's really bad. And you generally know who really wasn't doing it.
You would fly in as a squadron, right? You would have
always
bombers
formation.
and-
Almost, when you're in bombers, you're almost all for it. When down in Burma, we also had Burma on our hands there. And we would... well, I didn't do it much. I took a little bit of, AP Forsyth with me into the goddamn. And what these guys would do was they'd break up their tight formation and go around a village in Burma and empty their guns. They'd just turn the turret gun, so instead of like this, when they were going around these guns, their guns, the turrets, they hardly had to train at all, would go into those villages. And I could never find out who the hell was guilty of anything in those Burmese. Of course, that's where Vinegar Joe Stilwell really made his whatever reputation as a general was down there in the Burma Road situation. And those guys were one step after the other going over those 23,000 passes, 23,000-foot passes, yeah. But no, I think the discipline was, it could have been anything that we would have thought was an order and so forth. We could do it. But there were not much of that. I always felt, Jesus, what is your altitude, your bombing altitude? Always left up to the guy leading the formation that I had any experience with. Yeah. Very loose.
Do you think that there's a message from World War II for future generations?
Well, we were peculiarly unprepared for the world. Was if you'd have really read, you would know the condition of the mental set of the various countries of the world, East and West and so forth. Roosevelt seemed to understand that we are going to have a real fix on our hands here, sooner or later. We're going to do it. Clearly. And he even got the public along with him. They favored. They kept re-electing him, and he was a very powerful man. Did some things politically that we couldn't even think of doing today. Yeah, he really was leading. And he had it, but not too many other people were any. That's why this Pearl Harbor Day is just a blockbuster of an event. I don't know how you can change. I don't know how many citizens there were in the United States, but it's changed those people from just placid to fighting, and they kept it up. We had wonderful morale clear to the end of that fracas. Yeah. And that's the only thing that I can think of that we should have read. We had got rid of Mussolini, of course, but we should have read the tenacity of a guy like Hitler, I think, better. And we could just look around and we'd know that it's up to us, because we'd lost our solid allies, except like Canada, of course. But I don't know. There's a long way to go from a nation that had been made safe for democracy to that mortal war, like we had, well, like we did, probably had to do it to come out. Yeah.
Do you think it could happen again?
Well, I'm absolutely certain. And you start looking at the populated countries of the world: Pakistan, India, and China. Right? I don't know, but I would guess that it's going to be hard to get everybody into that thing. But I think, yes, I think you could have a world war again.
When you see the American flag or hear the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, what's that mean to you?
Ben, I'm telling you. When after we'd got established over there, and we would go, and generally one airplane, I would go up to see Chenault and talk about what we could do and so forth. And probably one of the first ones, drove right up to the front door and got out and went in to his office. And here was old Chenault sitting behind his desk, and an American flag, not a big one, but an American flag on his desk. There are probably pictures of like that. And I came into that room, and my God, there's the flag. Look at that flag. Hadn't seen it for a long time. And that's who I am. I'm an American. I can remember those things. That just froze me right there. An American flag. And this, well, he was in uniform at that time. And, oh yeah, I think that the people knew who they were. Yeah, I think so. And you're in such a strange situation, you know. I think it's there. Just plain old homely patriotism. That's who I am. And that's about what went through my head. That's who I am. I'm an American, for God's sake. There's the flag. Yeah. And a short time ago, he was a civilian, you know, there was no more established civilian, no clerk and all. But he knew who he was too. He really did. He didn't last too long.
Do you still feel the same way? I mean, you see a parade and the American flag comes.
Well, I'm not much of a flag waver. I don't fly it over the house, and I just don't do it. I don't know why I don't. I think my wife would like to, but we haven't really decided what to do, but I don't have any personal troubles about who I am, and my mission in life is that people should be friendly one to another, no matter whether you like them or not. This stuff that's been going on, Kosovo, just hate anyone that isn't a Kosovo citizen, right? Or, somebody different than you, by God, wipe them out if you can, is really, that's extent. It's there. You can examine it. We've got examples of it right today. Yeah. And they, I guess, think they're going to be better off by wiping out their friends. And I think we do it a little differently. Well, we've been doing it a long time. And in our Federalist Papers and the Constitution and so forth, the cue there is, this is a union. The union. Those first guys, before we even had a country here, really organized, they were talking about a union. See? And I think whether the word makes it in other applications, but certainly we have just about made it, I think, compared to a lot of other people that are kind of making it. But they don't know whether the guy wouldn't like to wipe him out. And I don't know, we have very much of that going on in our country, that we have areas that we want to wipe out. We've suffered a little bit over that too, I guess, trying to make up our feeble and very slow minds. But somehow that we're a union, and we've got to worry a little bit about the other guy in our country, and he's not nearly as bad as some people say. We can get along with him just fine.
When you went to war, to World War II, who or what were you fighting against?
Well, the idea that we've just been monkeying with, I think, Hitler was not understood by anyone who read his morning paper. The way he went into Poland in September 1st of 1940, 39 was Poland. It just didn't fit. He's got no damn business attacking a country like Poland just because he wanted to attack them and clear out some debris that he had or something. I don't know how he did it. He was pretty far gone, I think. Except he thought he was right.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing that...
Yeah, he could handle it.
What do you think the history books have left out?
Well, yeah, probably some of this stuff. This is stuff you don't ever talk about. And as I say, I don't even fly the flag. And I wouldn't want anybody to say, well, you don't fly the flag, so you have to stand back here someplace. I wouldn't want to say that, and nobody has given me any trouble with it. They just assume that he's an American, he pays his taxes or whatever he does, and I'm perfectly happy. I think we're catching it that way. You fly the flag if that's the way you happen to figure it out, and if you don't fly the flag, nobody gets worried about that, I guess. But it's a pretty complicated thing. It's hard to talk about, isn't it? How you really feel. And that's one of the things I don't understand, how Yugoslavia, how they got along even under Tito, even a guy that was lashing them into compliance. you know. How did they think they were going? What did they think they were doing? How are they ever going to have any cohesion if they act that way? And of course they didn't. And they're a wreck today. And we're probably stronger than, we just continue to be stronger in our relationships with people. We even get along with people that are our athletic enemies. Have a little trouble making enemies out of our opponents. Yeah.
I think that's probably was some of the toughest part about the U.S. I think that's a good thing. We have a tough time making enemies
Yeah.
out of our opponents. We're very humane.
And yes, I think so. I think that has that's been established. It works. We think, sometimes unconsciously, our thinking, but I think it'd be a problem to change this to something else. Take a Nazi regime, just give me a country the size of the United States with all our communications, and boy, we can do that and flat. I don't know. I think you would have a very tough problem there. I think we're pretty solid on that concept.